very basic diagram showing the different parts of the digestive tract and the associated digestive organs. I would rate this diagram as a 4 stars because it, it's so simple, so basic. 4 stars diagram showing the peritoneum, the ventral mesentery, the dorsal mesentery. It's a 3 stars diagram. It's of moderate importance. Not much details are covered in this diagram. A very, very important diagram showing the different layers of the gastrointestinal tube. This is the general structure of the gastrointestinal tube: mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa. Those are the 4 main layers. This diagram is highly important. It's a 5 stars diagram. Another 5 stars diagram is a diagram showing the sagittal section of the oral cavity, showing the boundaries of the oral cavity, the tonsils, the relation between the pharynx, esophagus, larynx, and trachea. It's a 5 stars diagram. Many of the information on this diagram is a repetition of what you already have seen in the respiratory system. Another 5 stars diagram is a diagram showing an anterior view of the oral cavity. The different arches on here, many of you get confused with them. Very important, the raphe on here. All this, including the raphe, it's going to be the hard palate. Soft palate is marked in here. And the pending structure down here in the midline, it's the uvula. So please make sure to see what exactly I am pointing to on the diagram. Most common wrong answers I see: people identifying the uvula as soft palate, people identifying soft palate as hard palate, and so on. The raphe as hard palate. So please make sure to pay attention to which part is actually pointed to on the exam. Again, this is a 5 stars diagram. 5 stars, it's a highly important diagram. A 3 stars diagram, much less important compared to the previous ones. The only things that I'm expecting you to know on this diagram is to identify the 4 different types of the papillae. The foliate papillae, the circumvallate papillae, fungiform, and the filiform. This is the most important part for this diagram. A 4 stars diagram, important but not highly important like the 5 stars ones. The main thing I want you to focus on is the different salivary glands, sublingual, submandibular, the parotid glands. Also, you need to be able to identify, of course, the parotid duct. So this is the main thing I want you to focus on while studying this diagram. A must be on your exam. A 10 stars diagram must be on your test. It's going to be the diagram showing the different parts of the stomach. Remember, the region that will be in direct connection with the esophagus is the cardia. The dome-shaped part of the stomach, it's the fundus. Mid region, it's the body. The most distal region on here, it's the pylorus, the pyloric canal, pyloric sphincter. When I mark those two regions together, I mean by this the whole segment. So we identify this as a body. If I'm marking only one part, I mean by this the muscle layer. All right, so if I'm marking just one type of muscles, please identify this as a muscle layer. If I'm marking more than one, I mean by this portion of the stomach, it's called what? It's gonna be the body of the stomach. It's a must be on your test. A three stars diagram, it's showing the section in the wall of the stomach. The main difference between this one and the previous diagram showing the cut section of the wall generally of the gastrointestinal tube is the presence of those pits on here, the presence of an extra muscle layer, which is the oblique muscle layer that is not present in the other parts of the gastrointestinal tract. All the other layers are present in the rest of the gastrointestinal tract, like the stomach. Another three stars diagram is showing the cut section of the wall of the small intestine. Major difference on here is the presence of the villi and the crypts. This arrangement of the mucosal lining, it's not present anywhere else other than in the small intestine. A 5 stars diagram, or I can rate it actually 10 stars diagram. It must be on your test. It's showing here the relationship between the liver, pancreas, and the gallbladder and duodenum. Very, very, very important. It must be on your test. Every single marking on here is highly important. The pancreas has three major parts: head of the pancreas, body, and the tail of the pancreas. Those are the three regions here forming the pancreas. Again, this is the 10 stars diagram. I mean by this, it must be on your test. Another 5 stars diagram, it's going to be the diagram showing the different parts of the large intestine. You need to be able to identify the different regions of the large intestine, including the cecum, the vermiform appendix, the ileocecal valve, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending sigmoid, rectum, anal canal, external anal sphincter, the anus. Less important structures are those constrictions, the ostrum of the large intestine, those are less important. The flexures on here, right colic and left colic flexures, another name for the right colic because it's on the same side as the liver, so we call it the hepatic flexure. Left colic because it's on the same side as the spleen, we call this as the splenic flexure. So those are less important in terms of identification, but they are still have a chance to appear on your exam. All right, so this completes all the diagrams related to the digestive system. Moving on to the diagrams, which are related to the reproductive system. We got seven main diagrams. All of them gonna appear on your test. So if I will rate, I will rate all of them 10 stars. You see on here, the sagittal section of the male reproductive system, showing the internal and external male reproductive organs. This is a must be on your test. Highly, highly important. I rated 5 or 10 stars. Transverse section or a sagittal section here of the testis, showing the different sets of tubules, the different parts of the epididymis, the spermatocoel, all those structures shown on the diagram are highly important. This diagram is a must be on your test, is highly important. I would even rate it 10 stars, 10 stars diagram. Another highly important diagram showing in a dorsal view of the penis as well as an anterior view of the urinary system. This diagram is highly important. It's a must be on your test. It's a 10 stars diagram. No, most of the information it has been repeated from the previous diagrams. The only new information that you will see here on this diagram is the diagram of the coronal section of the penis, showing the corpora cavernosa and the corpus spongiosum. Those are the three highly important diagrams of the male reproductive system. Must be on your test, a 10 stars diagram. It's a diagram showing the sagittal section of the female pelvis, showing the internal, external female reproductive organs and the related digestive and urinary organs as well. Every single marking on this diagram is highly important and it's going to be testable. Another 10 stars diagram, it's a must be on your test, is going to be the anterior view of the uterus and the other internal female reproductive organs, including the fallopian tubes or the uterine tubes, the ovary, and the different ligaments that will be holding them in their place. Every single marking on this diagram is highly important and will be tested. A 5 stars diagram, it's highly important but not compared to the previous 5 diagrams. This is a 5 stars diagram showing the proliferating follicles. So you can see the primordial follicle, the primary follicles, secondary follicles, and the mature or the Grecian follicle on here. The cluster of follicular cells around the egg, as you've seen, it's called the zona pellucida. The space in the mature follicle that is filled with fluid, this is called the antrum. And if you remember, in any of those follicles, what is the type of eggs that I keep inside? It's a primary oocyte, because the primary oocyte will not be able to complete the first phase of meiosis 1, until it's time for ovulation. After ovulation, you will see this is going to be the secondary oocyte now, because it was capable to complete meiosis 1. The oocyte will not be present on its own. After ovulation, it's still going to be surrounded by some follicular cells. We call the cluster of cells now around the egg, it's the corona radiata. Corona means crown, Radiata means it's radiating. Remember, the remaining follicular cells gonna become the corpus luteum that's gonna be producing the progesterone in the second half of the ovarian cycle. Highly important diagram again, but less important than the previous 5 diagrams. Another 5 stars diagram. It's going to be the diagram showing the sagittal section and of the breast. Remember, the mammary glands are arranged into lobules and they are held by the suspensory ligaments. Each of those glands has a duct. If you remember, we call this is the lactiferous duct. And towards the end of the duct, we've got those bulging parts. Those are the lactiferous sinuses. Each sinus gonna be connected to the nipple by its own duct. And you're gonna have the openings of those ducts on the nipple. Again, the dark skin around the nipple, this is what we call the areola. The muscle on which the breast is going to be located, or on top of which the breast is going to be located, this is going to be the pectoralis major. Pectoralis major. Those are pretty much all the important diagrams that you should be preparing for the upcoming lab exam. Again, diagram-based questions are going to be representing 85% of the lab exam. Remember, this upcoming lab exam is out of 100 points. So those diagrams are going to be representing 85%, or in other words, 85 points. One essay questions that you're going to have is going to be asking you about your description of the oogenesis, follicular genesis, and the hormonal control of the uterine cycle. And this is going to be explained in all those slides from your PowerPoint. So in the follicular genesis, you need to mention the stages of the development of the follicle. Primordial follicle, primary follicle, secondary follicle, the Graafian follicle, ovulation, and the corpus luteum formation. This is the follicular genesis. Oogenesis, you need to explain here the steps of the oogenesis, starting with an oogonium stem cell that becomes a primary oocyte, and you need to mention that this is only taking place during fetal life. It stops after birth, and the primary oocytes are going to be kept arrested in prophase 1 until after puberty. Each time after puberty, the primary oocyte that will become activated in the dominant follicle will be able to complete meiosis 1 by the time of ovulation. After ovulation, this secondary becomes secondary oocyte. Secondary oocyte is not the mature egg yet. It's going to be arrested in metaphase 1, and it will not complete meiosis 1 until it gets penetrated by sperm. This is what you need to mention in the oogenesis. The uterine cycle, you need hormonal interactions. First, you need to mention the effect of the gonadotropin releasing hormone on the pituitary gland. You need to mention that the estrogen is the hormone that gets released through from the growing follicles, and that the growing follicle going to be releasing high levels of estrogen, which will have a positive feedback on the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary gland, causing them to release large amounts of LH, because this is the LH surge that takes place on day 14 of the cycle. Corpus luteum will then be formed, producing progesterone. Day 26 to day 28, corpus luteum will be degraded and the ovarian hormone will sharply decline, and this will cause another cycle to start. The uterine cycle or the menstrual cycle, you need to mention the three phases, the effective hormones in each of those phases, and what are the changes taking place in the endometrial line. So starting with the menstrual phase is going to be between day 1 to day 5 of the uterine cycle. This is when all the ovarian hormones have declined. Stratum functionalis during this phase is going to be shedding, and there will be the menstrual blood flow taking place. Second phase of the uterine cycle, this is the proliferative phase, when I have the estrogen levels rising due to the proliferation of the follicles. The estrogen will be promoting the generation of the new functional layer and will be enhancing this layer to develop progesterone receptors, causing the glands to enlarge and the spiral arteries to increase in number. A third and final phase of the uterine cycle is going to be taking place under the effect of the progesterone. Progesterone will enhance further development of the endometrium, increasing the glandular secretions, and engorges the spiral arteries with blood. Also, in the same time, we've got a cervical mucus plug that gets formed. All right, so this secretory phase is going to be between day 15 to day 28. All right, so this is all the things that you need to mention for this question. All right, this is a big essay question. You need to prepare it. You need to practice writing this answer many times for you to become comfortable with what you should be writing down on this essay question. Unlike the previous essay questions, they are much shorter in length. This is a big essay question worth a lot of points. So you need to spend enough time practicing and repeating this information until you're comfortable writing it on the day of the exam. So the essay question is what I have been explaining for the last 15 minutes. All right. So again, what you should be writing down, you need to write down folliculogenesis. So you need to mention all the steps of the development of the folliculogenesis. Oogenesis. And the oogenesis, you need to mention the development of the egg, starting from an oogonium until it becomes an ovum. You need to mention the different steps of the maturation and when they are taking place. So you start by mitosis, meiosis 1. Mitosis is only taking place during fetal life. Meiosis 1, The primary oocyte will be kept arrested in prophase 1 until puberty. If the egg reaches the dominant follicle, becomes the one selected egg each month that will be inside the dominant follicle will be able to complete meiosis 1. After ovulation, if the egg gets penetrated, it becomes an ovum, becomes a mature egg. This is what you need to write down as a response for your explanation of the oogenesis. Third part of the question is going to be asking you of the hormonal regulation and interaction during the ovarian cycle or driving the ovarian cycle. So GnRH gets released from the hypothalamus, activates the pituitary gland to release FSH, LH, causing the maturation of the follicle. Graafian follicle will be releasing large amounts of estrogen. Large amounts of estrogen will have a positive feedback on the pituitary gland, causing a sudden rise of LH by day 14 of the cycle. This is what we call the LH surge. LH surge gonna enhance the primary oocyte to complete meiosis 1 and becomes the secondary oocyte, gonna be triggering ovulation and corpus luteum formation. Corpus luteum is going to be producing the progesterone, and the progesterone again, it's going to be declining if there is no fertilization of the egg taking place. Corpus luteum degenerates, it causes a sharp drop in all ovarian hormones, and another cycle starts. This is your response of the hormonal interaction. A last part of the question is going to be asking you about the phases of the uterine cycle. So you need to know what are the 3 phases, from what day to what day for each, what is the hormone responsible for each, and what is actually taking place in the endometrial lining during those phases. So menstrual phase, day 1 to day 5. I have decline in all ovarian hormones, shedding of the endometrium, menstrual blood flow. Second phase, I have proliferation of the follicles, rising levels of estrogen. Under the effect of the estrogen, you're going to have proliferation of the endometrial lining, glands are enlarged, spiral arteries are increasing in number. Third phase, from day 15 to day 28. This is the secretory phase under the effect of the progesterone released from the corpus luteum. Development, causing further development of the endometrium, glandular secretions. That's why we called it secretory phase. And as you enhance the glandular secretion, also the cervix contain glands, and those glands are going to be responsible for the formation of the cervical mucus plug. All right, so again, 4 parts on here that you need to focus on for the essay question. First one, it's the oogenesis, steps of the oogenesis. Second one, it's going to be the folliculogenesis. A third one is going to be the hormonal interaction. And the last one is going to be the uterine cycle or the menstrual cycle. Is this clear, Tram? Any questions? Any questions?